Good afternoon, wherever you're watching us. Welcome to the world's principled leaders. And this is coming to you live from the Huntsman Business School at Utah State University. I'm Michael Hastings, Lord Hastings, a member of the British House of Lords, and my co-professor Boyd Craig. We're both working together on a series teaching our students about understanding and leading change in a complex world. And today we have a very, very special guest with us, Stephen M.R. Covey, whose unique teachings and his book on the speed of trust will be the centerpiece of our conversation. You're very welcome to stay with us. Stephen, welcome.
Thank you, Lord Hastings. It's a real honor to be with you. Also, Professor Craig, and with this great class at Utah State University, and to our YouTube broadcast audience as well. I'm delighted to be here with you.
Over to you, Stephen. Thank you for joining us.
Wonderful. Well, great. Well, my friends, what I'd love to do if I could is kind of dive into an overview of the speed of trust, and then and give you kind of the essence of the ideas. I'm also going to try to get you into the application of it. So it's not just theory, but we'll get into practice, and then we'll take some questions. And then the last half hour of our class today, we're going to have a practitioner of the speed of trust in Doug Conant, the former CEO of the Campbell Soup Company, who really built trust as the hallmark of his leadership and achieved extraordinary results. So we'll see a case study in action of a remarkable person and leader. So I'm delighted to be here with you. So what I'd like to do here is I'll share my screen. And let me begin by sharing this. I was thrilled to be part of the presentation ceremony about a year and a half ago, where we presented to Professor Hastings, Lord Michael Hastings, the Stephen R. Covey Principle-Centered Leadership Award in 2019, and for exemplary principle-centered leadership. And so what a treat to be here at this class that is taught by Professor Hastings and Professor Craig together. I'm very excited. My topic is the speed of trust, the one thing that changes everything. And so I'm going to begin with a statement, an academic statement, and then a business statement about how trust has become truly the new currency of our times. This is Francis Fukuyama, the Stanford Fellow. He said this. He said, a nation's well-being, as well as its ability to compete, is conditioned by a single pervasive cultural characteristic, the level of trust inherent in the society. So that's for a nation, your well-being, your ability to compete. Let me ratchet that down and make it more accessible. An organization's well-being, a team's well-being, as well as its ability to compete, is conditioned by a single pervasive cultural characteristic, the level of trust inherent in the organization, on the team. Trust is impacting both our well-being and our ability to compete. The well-being is the culture, the ability to compete, the competitiveness. It impacts the culture that we build that can create and attract and retain and engage and inspire people. It also impacts our ability to collaborate and innovate, to stay relevant in a changing world. Trust impacts both, not in small ways, but in profound ways. It is our new currency. Here's how Ken Chenault, who just recently retired as chairman and CEO of American Express, how he put the importance of trust in our context today. He said, the competitive advantage of trust has never been more important or valuable than it is today. Now, look, it's always mattered, but especially today in a low trust world where the trust has gone down all around us. And so if we can build trust and get good at building high trust in a world of declining trust, what an advantage that will be to us as individuals, as leaders, as teams, as organizations. to be distinguished by trust. It'll cut through all kinds of noise and clutter. And we can do that. We can do it intentionally. So what I'd like to do is share kind of three main points. I'm going to call these three big ideas. And this will be the outline of my presentation. So I'll state these three big ideas up front quickly, and then I'll work through each one in greater detail. And that way you'll know where we're at and where we're going with this presentation. I'm going to try to make these 3 points. Here they are. So the first big idea is I want to show you how trust is an economic driver, not merely a social virtue. If I could put that another way, there is a business case for trust. It is financial, not just social. You can put an economic value on it. That's a paradigm shift for most people. Everyone knows trust is important. They've often not thought about it as an economic driver. They've usually just thought about it as a social virtue. I want to show you how it's both. I'll call that the business case for trust. The second big idea I'll call the leadership case for trust, which is this, that trust is the number one competency of leadership needed today, more than any other. That's a bold statement to make. And the reason I make it is because if you get good at trust, it'll make you better at everything else that you need to do. It is a performance multiplier for every other competency of leadership. Whereas low trust will be a diminisher, it will dilute, tax everything you're trying to do. I like to put it this way. Trust is the one thing that changes everything. So that's the leadership case for trust. Look at that. There's a business case. There's a leadership case. Answering the question, why? Why is trust so vital today? Why is this our new currency? Now, if you buy the why, you then want to move into the how. And that's the third big idea, which is this, that trust is a learnable skill. It is a competency. It is something that we can learn and do and create and grow and establish and expand. And in some cases, even restore when it's been lost. And in fact, we can get good at this, building trust on purpose. And here is where I'm going to give us some tools. They'll be in the form of these cards for the students in class today. And for the YouTube audience, I'll still give you kind of a framework for this. And what I'm going to try to do is give you a framework so you can think about trust, a language, a common language, so we can talk about trust, and then a process, a behavioral process, so we can actually behave our way into greater trust. And the whole idea here is to make trust practical, tangible, actionable, something you can do. And I'm going to actually have you as a student or as a participant in this broadcast apply this to yourself in your life of how you can increase trust intentionally. I'm going to give you a methodology of how. Okay, so that's where we're going to go. But let's make this a little bit more personal up front. So I'd like each of you, if you'd be willing, take a moment and identify a person who you work with in your life and with whom you have a high trust relationship. So think of someone who you work with and who you trust. So as a student, this could be a fellow student. It could be a professor, a teacher. It could be an advisor or a counselor. Maybe you've got a job. It could be an employer, a boss. You decide. But someone you work with who you trust. Does everyone got someone in mind? Okay, great. With this person in mind, let me ask you a couple of questions and capture your first impressions. What's it like to work with this person who you trust? What's it like to work with him or her? Go ahead and just jot it down. And what's it like to communicate with this person? What does communication look like when you trust each other? Capture that. How fast can you get things done? What kind of results are you able to achieve? All right. Let me have you shift gears and identify a second person. And you know where I'm going with this one, right? So this time, identify someone who you work with, who you need to work with as part of your world. But in this case, with whom you have, for whatever reason, a low trust relationship. So you need to work together, but the trust is low, or at least not where you want it to be ideally. Now, again, it could be with a colleague, a peer, fellow student, a teacher, a professor, could be with an advisor, counselor, boss. You decide. The only criteria here, You need to work together, but there's low trust, or at least not where you want it to be. Now, identify someone in this relationship. Same questions. Capture your impressions. What's it like to work with this person when you don't trust each other? And what's it like to communicate with this person without trust? Capture that. How long does it take to get anything done? What kind of results are you able to achieve or not? All right. So could you kind of just step back from these two relationships and compare and contrast the two relationships? My guess is that for most of us, this is night and day, isn't it? Especially the higher the trust on the one side, the lower on the other. It's not a small incremental difference. It's a profound difference. And we all know it. Look, that was just two relationships. Play that out now as a leader into multiple relationships, or play that out onto a team, or between teams, or in a company, in a culture, with customers, with partners. See, trust changes everything, not in small incremental ways, in profound ways. And we all intuitively know this. Let me continue to build upon this. Let me give you a brief definition for trust, so we're all on the same page, and then I'll dive into those three big ideas. So here's the most simple definition I can give. By trust, I simply mean confidence. Confidence. In fact, in many languages, trust and confidence are the exact same word. Like in Spanish, French, same word. In English, we have two words for it. So the opposite of trust, distrust, is suspicion. See, I don't trust someone if I'm suspicious about their agenda or their motive. I do trust when I feel confidence. So confidence versus suspicion. Now, where does that confidence come from? I suggest it comes from having two sources. It comes from having both character and competence. Character and competence, both are vital. If you have one, but lack the other, you will not sustain the trust. So in this sense, trust is earned. How do we earn it? By demonstrating our character and our competence. This makes a person credible. It makes a person trustworthy. And we'll never have trust without trustworthiness. And yet by itself, it's insufficient. It's not enough just to be trustworthy and in order to have trust. You have to do more. Let me tell you why. Consider this. You could have two trustworthy people working together, and they're both trustworthy. And yet, there might be no trust between them, even though they're both trustworthy, if neither person is willing to extend trust to the other. So there's a third part of the definition that's critical for us as leaders, and that's simply this. You have to give trust to get trust. You have to extend it to receive it. So in this sense, trust is given. See, I get asked all the time, Stephen, is trust earned or is it given? And my response, yes. I mean, absolutely it is earned. How? Through our character, through our competence. But it's not enough to be trustworthy. We also have to be trusting. And I believe the great opportunity of our times today in a low trust world is to not only lead out by being trustworthy, but to be trusting as a person, as a leader, and to find the ways to lead out and extend trust to others. Here's why that's so vital. When you give trust, people receive it and they return it, and they're inspired by it, and they rise to the occasion, and they perform better, and they give it back to you. I like to put it this way. To be trusted is the most inspiring form of human motivation. It brings out the very best in all of us. And we as leaders need to be more trusting of each other, more trusting of our colleagues and our peers. And you watch, people will respond to that trust. They'll perform better and they'll reciprocate. They'll give it back. There's a reciprocity of trust. Now, look, I'm not advocating that you just blindly trust anyone and everyone. That wouldn't be smart. I call that a blind trust. I'm talking about a smart trust. We're always assessing the situation, the risk, the credibility of the people involved, but you're trying to find the opportunities to intentionally extend trust to people, so that you generate that reciprocity and that you inspire them and that they can perform and rise to the occasion and do better because of it. And so it's a smart trust. You always have clear expectations. You create together an agreed upon process for accountability to those expectations. And with that, you can find yourself becoming more trusting than maybe you thought imaginable. Yes, to trust is to take a risk. I know that, and you know that. But not to trust is also to take a risk. And I believe as leaders that not trusting is more often the greater risk. So again, be smart about it, always with the expectations and accountability, but we need to be trusting as well as trustworthy. Now, with that in place, let me briefly take us through these three big ideas. So the first big idea, there's economics to trust. There's a business case for trust. Here's a simple formula that you can apply in any situation. Trust always affects two outcomes, speed and cost. And the formula looks like this. When the trust goes down in a relationship, on a team, in a company, in a culture, with customers, in a marketplace, in a society. When the trust goes down, here's what you will find. The speed goes down with it. Everything will take you longer to do. The cost goes up. Everything costs you more to do. Now, this is a tax. It's a low trust tax. You want examples of tax? They're all around us in our world today. Just think about the low trust relationship you identified a few minutes ago, the low trust one. My guess is it takes you longer, costs you more to get anything done. Think of teams you've been a part of, where for whatever reason, there's distrust on the team. What if as a student, you're on a group project and there's really low trust among the group? Everything will take you longer. Everything will cost you more. How about in an organization, in a company, when there's two teams, departments, and functions, they got to work together and collaborate, but they don't trust each other? Takes you longer, costs you more. What if you lose trust with the partner, with the customer? Everything slows down, costs you more. That is a tax. It's a low trust tax. It's a wasted tax. But here's the good news. The converse is equally real. And when that trust goes up in the relationship, on the team, in the company, in any culture, in any relationship, when the trust goes up, you will find the speed goes up with it. You can do everything faster, infinitely faster, and the cost comes down. It costs you less. Now that is a dividend, a high trust dividend. My friends, it is that simple, that powerful, that predictable. And the examples of a dividend are also all around us. Just think about the high trust relationship that you identified a few minutes ago. The high trust one. My guess is you move fast, low cost. Think of teams you've been a part of, where there's high trust on the team, the speed at which you can move. How about when you're on a group project and the group really has high confidence and trust in each other? How about when you have a high trust relationship with any stakeholder, with customers, with partners, with the professor? You move fast, low cost. You see, speed happens when people trust each other, and nothing is as fast as the speed of trust, and nothing is as profitable as the economics of trust, and nothing is as agile for a business or an organization as a culture of trust. You can pivot, adapt, and respond. There's economic advantage to trust. It's not just a social virtue, and you can put a value on this. And the data on this is overwhelming. I'll just show you briefly, and then I'll give some case studies, including with what Doug Conant achieved at Campbell Soup Company. But here's what the data shows. This is the 100 best companies to work for, done by Fortune magazine and the Great Place to Work Institute. To be on this list, you have to have high trust. It's actually 2/3 the criteria. In a 13-year study, these companies outperform the market, these high trust companies, by 288%, nearly 3 times higher. So here's another way of looking at this. High trust is a performance multiplier of about 3x. Low trust is a destructive tax. It will get you at every gate. There's other studies that show a similar thing. It's about a 3 times multiplier. Even in schools, we work with K through 12 schools, and here's what the data shows. High trust schools have a 3.5 times greater probability of increasing test scores than do low trust schools. So here's my main point for all of us. You start with trust. If this is the essence of who you are, your currency, you will have a multiplier effect on everything else you are trying to do, including economic advantage. And it will be about 3 times higher. you can put a value on trust. And that's remarkable. And let me give you the second big idea. And that's the leadership case for trust. And so I'll state it this way. Trust is the number one competency of leadership needed today. Why? Because it'll make you better at every other competency. It's the one thing that changes everything. And so let me illustrate what I mean by that. All the things we're trying to do as a leader will do better if we start with trust. We'll get a multiplier effect. So what are those things we need to do as a leader? We need to lead change with agility. This is a big part of what you're learning in the World's Principal Leaders series. Got to lead change. Your ability to lead change goes up when there's trust. If people don't trust you, they're always fighting you and they're resisting the change. You don't get the involvement. You don't get the commitment. You don't get the energy behind it. And the results are not near as good. You're not near as agile. We have to build high-performing teams. You know what? If you don't trust each other, you're not a team. I believe that you're just, without trust, you're just a group of individuals working on a project. It is trust that turns a group into a team. It's transformative to the very nature of the relationship. So what are other things we need to do? We need to, so lead change with agility, build high-performing teams. We want those teams to be inclusive. This is a vital dimension today in all of our leadership. Diversity, equity, and inclusion. You know what? Differences are our strengths when people trust each other. But differences are viewed suspiciously, and in some cases, even divisively when people don't trust each other. Perhaps our strongest unconscious bias is who we choose to trust or not. The more you can lead out with trust, the more you can run with our differences as our strengths and the greatest source of creativity and innovation. So trust helps us develop cultures of inclusion. We also, with trust, we become more collaborative. We become more innovative. We become more engaged. See, all of these dimensions of leadership, these competencies, inclusion, collaboration, innovation, engagement, building teams, leading change, they all go up dramatically with trust. They go down with distrust. So let me take a couple of these if I could. Let's just take collaboration. See, I believe without trust, people don't really collaborate. I believe more likely what happens without trust, they merely coordinate. There's nothing wrong with coordination. It's a good thing, but you're leaving a lot of value on the table. Your performance is nowhere near your potential. You increase the level of trust, you'll move to a higher level of cooperation. You increase the level of trust even more, you'll move to a much higher level of collaboration, creative collaboration, innovative collaboration. And it is trust that turns mere coordination into true collaboration. Here's my question for any leader in any organization. I ask this question: on our teams, between our teams, and with our partners, are we truly and creatively collaborating? Or are we too often merely coordinating, where our performance is nowhere near our potential? What's interesting today, we have all the technology tools needed to collaborate. We have the technology. The real question is whether or not we have the trust needed to collaborate. Because in a very real sense, trust is the ultimate collaboration tool. How about engagement? This is vital. Nothing engages people like being trusted. Nothing disengages people by like being trusted. Let me give you a study and then a case, let me give you some research and then a case study. So the research shows this: employees who trust their immediate supervisors are 14 times more likely to be fully engaged than employees who don't. That was the number one driver of engagement by far, 14 times higher. The next highest driver of engagement was if you were a member of a team in which you were 2.6 times more likely to be fully engaged. But the highest by far was if you could trust your supervisor, you're 14 times more likely. So you want to move the needle on engagement? Start with trust. You're going to hear from an extraordinary leader, Doug Conant. And you saw in the Harvard Business Review article that Doug and I co-authored together his story. You know what? He went from among the lowest engaged companies to the highest engaged companies, from lowest to world-class at Campbell Soup. When he came in as the new CEO, they were among the lowest. In fact, the Gallup people said, this is as bad as we've seen. And they went from lowest to highest during his tenure. And the key starting point, his core model, was all around inspiring trust. Now, he did a whole lot of other things too, but it started with this core leadership model, inspiring trust. You build trust, you'll engage your people. And more than that, you will inspire them. And you're going to hear from Doug. It's a remarkable story. And trust has been his currency in everything. It's been his multiplier, his accelerator, and his energizer for the entire culture. And not only does it engage people, not only does trust engage, it inspires. Here's an illustration of that. It's Colleen Wegman, president and CEO of Wegmans Food Markets. They're in the Northeast, high trust company. They build high internal trust with their people. They build high external trust with their customers. And this inspires their people. They want to be a part of it. They're drawn to it. They're attracted by it. Here's the average turnover rate in the grocery store business, which is their industry, 48%. Here's what it looks like at high trust Wegmans, 3%, 1/16 the respective industry averages, because people are drawn to this kind of culture. And that's one of the key imperatives of our time today, is to build a culture that is high trust so that we can attract and retain and engage and inspire our people. It's all about inspiration. And inspiration is even more powerful than engagement. It's the new engagement, if you will. High trust helps you do that like nothing else. So friends, here's my summary of this leadership case. Yeah, I could go on and on and on. I've gone through leading change, agility, building teams, building inclusivity, collaboration, innovation, engagement. All these things go up with trust. They go down with distrust in profound ways. So my summary is this, that trust is about energy and joy. And when trust goes down in relationships, teams, cultures, the energy goes down with it, as does the joy. It is exhausting. It is no fun. But thankfully, the converse is true. When that trust goes up in teams and cultures and organizations, the energy goes up in all its forms: creativity, innovation, engagement, commitment, passion, inspiration, as will the joy in all its forms, the happiness, the satisfaction, the fun. Nothing is as engaging, as inspiring, as energizing as a culture of trust. And we need that today in a low trust world. And the neuroscience on this is overwhelming. If you're interested, read an article by Paul Zak, a neuroscientist, who wrote an article in Harvard Business Review called The Neuroscience of Trust. It shows how high trust cultures are far more engaged, more energized than low trust cultures, with less stress, less burnout, more creativity, innovation, engagement, that is energy and joy writ large. So trust is the right thing to do. It will impact our well-being. It will change our culture profoundly. Trust is the economic thing to do. 3 times multiplier. It's the convergence of both. Trust is an idea whose time has come. It is the currency of our times. And that brings me to the third big idea, that trust is a learnable skill. It is a competency. So friends, what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to go briefly through this. My goal right now is just awareness, but I want to show you that there's a methodology to make trust a learnable skill, a framework, a language, and a process of how you can build trust on purpose. I'm going to go fast because my goal right now is just awareness, to show you there's a methodology. Then for the students in particular, you're getting these tools, these cards. You can go much deeper. For those on the broadcast, I'll still name the tools in the cards. I'll give you the framework. You can apply it. So I want to give you the methodology, and then I want you to apply it to yourself as a student, as a leader. And everyone's a leader. That's what we're learning in this class, right? Leadership is a choice, not a position. As a student, you lead your life and you lead in relationships. You are a leader now. Trust is a learnable skill. Here is the overarching paradigm of how trust is built. And for those that have the cards, this is the very first card in the deck. the ripple effect, the 5 waves of trust. The whole idea is that high trust teams, high trust cultures are created from the inside out. Trust is created from the inside out. The best way to illustrate inside out is the ripple effect metaphor, where the drop of water comes down. The waves, they start at the inside, they ripple out. So the first wave, where this all begins, is with ourself, self-trust. It then ripples out from ourself to our relationships, one-on-one. It then ripples out from our relationship to our team, our group, our organization. If I'm the leader of a team, it's my team. If I'm the CEO of the organization, it's the organization. That's my organization, my team. It then ripples out from there to my stakeholders, what we might call market trust or stakeholder trust. It then ripples out from there into all society, societal trust. So here's 5 ways of trust. If I want to diagnose something, the best way I do that, I start at the outside and move in. But if I want to change, develop, and transform trust, the best way to do that, I start at the inside and move out. So I look in the mirror, I start with myself. Do I trust myself? Do I give to my team a leader who they can trust? Is it smart to trust me? And I ripple out from there naturally and abundantly. Inside out is the only way to build, grow, sustain trust for all of us. So that's the overarching paradigm. And let me give you 2 building blocks of how we build this trust from the inside out. Trust is a function of 2 things. First, of our credibility, and second, of our behavior. Credibility and behavior are the building blocks for trust. Let me briefly describe credibility. I'll give you a framework and a language and a process for credibility. Then I'll do the same for behavior. And I'm gonna pick one of the dimensions of credibility, and I'm gonna ask you to work on it as a leader. And I'm gonna have you pick 3 behaviors to work on of your choosing. So my whole goal here is I'm gonna give you a framework, but then I want you to apply the framework for yourself as a leader to build trust. So let's take credibility first. This is the foundation on which all trust is built. I use the metaphor of a tree for credibility. You have the roots and the trunk of the tree. That's like character, vital, but by itself insufficient, like a tree stump. Then you have the upper half of the tree, the branches and the fruits. That's more visible, like competence is more visible, vital, but by itself insufficient, like a tree without roots. So what I'm looking for, of course, is that combination of both character and competence. When I have both, that's credibility. And upon that, I can build trust exceptionally fast. Well, there are what I call 4 cores of credibility. 2 of which belong to character and 2 of which belong to competence. So these 4 cores of credibility are really a deeper dive into the character and competence construct. I'm going to go 1 level down to make this more practical, more tangible, more actionable for me as a leader. So let me briefly describe these 4 cores of credibility, give you a framework, a language, and a process of how you'll build trust through credibility as a starting point. And then I'll have you apply it to yourself. So this will be the roots, the trunk, the branches, and the fruits, representing the 4 cores of credibility. If you've got the tools, the cards, these will be your gold cards up front. There's 4 of them. So the roots of the tree, the first core of credibility, where this all begins, is integrity. And integrity is what you think it is. It is honesty. It is truthfulness. It is doing the right thing, being congruent. You are who you say you are. You're aligned. You're congruent. You're authentic. You're real. It takes humility to have integrity, that there are principles that govern. It also takes courage. Because let me tell you why it takes courage to have integrity. Because it's relatively easy to do the right thing when it doesn't cost me anything. Aha, the test of integrity is when there's a cost or a consequence. What do I do then? Do I still do the right thing? That's the test. So integrity is the roots. My guess is we all get that one. You think of trust, you think of integrity usually. Let me build out the tree. I think you'll find these next dimensions, these other cores of credibility to be additive to your understanding, or more likely just to give you language for what you intuitively already know. So the trunk of the tree is the second core, and that is our intent, our motive, and our agenda. The motive that best builds credibility and trust is caring. The agenda is when we seek mutual benefit. That's called win-win. And when you have that type of approach, when you seek mutual benefit, people tend to trust you. If they don't, if they see you as self-serving, they tend to withhold the trust. Do you have their best interests in mind or only your own? And if they only think you are serving yourself, they will tend not to trust you. So this is really powerful. I'll come back to this one in a moment. So integrity and intent flow from your character. The next two cores of credibility flow from your competence. So this will be the branches and the fruits of the tree. The third core is the branches. I call it capabilities. That's our talents, our skills, our expertise, our knowledge. The key question here, are we relevant? Are we learning, growing, improving, getting better, staying relevant? If we are, we'll tend to be trusted. If we're not, if we lose that relevancy, at some point we could lose the credibility and the trust, whether it be of our own people or of the marketplace. So companies recreate themselves, reinvent themselves to stay relevant. Organizations do it, functions do it, teams do it, leaders do it. As a student, you are focusing right now on developing capabilities to be and stay relevant in a changing world. And one of those capabilities, by the way, is being able to build and create trust. Those branches produce the fruits. And the fourth core of credibility are the fruits. It's our performance, our results, our current performance, our past performance. Why does that matter? Because people do project upon us future performance based upon what they've seen. When they see a track record of results, it gives them confidence. If there's a gap in those results, there'll be a gap in that confidence. Our results matter enormously to the building of trust. So look at that. There's a simple and yet I believe profound model of credibility for a leader, for a team, for an organization. 4 cores: integrity and intent flowing from your character, capabilities and results flowing from your competence. All 4 are vital to build trust, to sustain it in any relationship, any team, any culture, for you as a leader, for your team, for your organization. You have these cards in front of you. And what I'd like to do is illustrate. I want to talk about one of the cores of credibility, and I'm going to invite you to work on this one as a leader as we walk out of our session today. The one I'm picking is intent. And the whole idea here is that intent, again, your motive is caring and your agenda is seeking mutual benefit. That's win-win. If we can move the needle on intent, it will change how we do everything else that we're trying to do, because people will see you differently. They'll interpret you differently when they believe you have their best interests in mind and when they believe and feel that you care about them. Like the expression goes, nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. Caring is the motive. Mutual benefit is the agenda. So here's a great way, a couple of best practices to improve intent. Look on the back of the card, that third one. You want to improve your intent? Best way I know is to declare your intent. That means you're open, you're transparent. You don't have a hidden agenda. You have an open agenda. You give the why behind the what. Always give the why. So you come in and you say, team, here's what we're trying to do. Here's why we're trying to do it. Here's my agenda. It's not hidden. It's open. It's transparent. There's nothing to hide. And I declare it. Declare your intent. You're going to see a great practitioner of this, Doug Conant. He goes one step further. He says, not only should you declare your intent as you work with people so that you're open and transparent and even vulnerable, he goes one step further and says, declare yourself. Here's who I am, how I like to work, what's important to me. And you open yourself up. You take the mystery out of the relationship of how to work with me. And in turn, you effectively invite the other person to do the same. Your vulnerability invites them to likewise reciprocate, and it creates trust. So you want to increase trust, focus on intent. And here's a great best practice. Declare your intent, declare yourself. And when you're on the other side of the equation, as you work together, start by assuming positive intent. I learned this from Indra Nooyi, one of the great leaders I've ever known. She said the single greatest learning of her life was to always assume positive intent. because it changes everything. So friends, as you look at these 4 cores of credibility, I'm inviting you, all 4 are important, but I'm inviting you as you walk out of our session today, start with intent because of how that impacts everything else you're trying to do. And here's a couple of best practices. Declare your intent, declare yourself, assume positive intent. You watch how much farther, faster, better you can build trust by doing this. Trust flows from credibility, but it also flows from behavior. And behavior is how we do what we do. There's hundreds of behaviors that are out there. From the hundreds, we've identified the highest leverage behaviors that help us grow trust. From the hundreds, there's 13. They'll build trust faster. They'll destroy trust faster. Now, look, for our purposes today, we're not going to go through all of these. I'll just name them. I'll highlight just one, but you'll get this instantly. They're self-evident. They're intuitive. But when I name these from this list, I want you to pick 3 of them to work on. And then I'm going to have you actually pair up with a learning partner and share which 3 you're picking and why. And again, you'll get these instantly. So the first 5 flow from your character. If you have the cards, you can follow along. These are the blue cards. Talk straight. By the way, all the behaviors are phrased in 2-word expressions for simplicity and clarity. Demonstrate respect. Create transparency. Right wrongs. Show loyalty. Now, here's how you can use these cards as tools. On the top, it describes it. Talk straight. You tell the truth. You call things what they are. Use simple language. Candor is a language of trust. At the bottom of the card, it describes the opposite. That's when people lie. And this is self-evident, isn't it? You tell the truth, you build trust. You lie, you destroy it. What makes this so difficult on teams and organizations? I believe it's less the opposite, lying. That's self-evident, it's not going to work. And more often, the counterfeit. If you look at the back of the card at the bottom, there's the counterfeit. The counterfeit, talking straight, is when people spin and twist and manipulate in posture and tell you what you want to hear, or when they technically tell the truth and leave the wrong impression. So I think if you look at all 13 behaviors, you'll find the behavior is straightforward. If I tell the truth, of course, I build trust. The opposite will be equally straightforward. And if I lie, I'll destroy it. What trips us up so often is the counterfeit behavior. So beware the counterfeits. And right above that is kind of a what to say. This helps you become more skilled at talking straight or any of the 13 behaviors. The next 5 flow from your competence, deliver results, get better, confront reality, clarify expectations, practice accountability. And the last 3 flow from equally from both character and competence in equal amounts. Listen first. Keep commitment. You do what you say you're going to do. Extend trust. So I started with extend trust. I end with it. And I want to give you as a takeaway. So actually, here's what I like to do. I've named these 13. I've done it fast, but don't you get it instantly? They're self-evident. They're intuitive. Here's just a quick exercise. Because I want you to walk out with practice. Would you pick 3 of these to work on? And if you could get better at, it will help you build trust. It doesn't mean you're going to ignore the other 10. It just means you're going to start by focusing on these 3 and give special emphasis to it. And I'll have you add those 3 to the core of credibility that you picked, that I picked for you, which is intent. So pick 3 of these to work on. And class, you're going to be paired up with a learning partner. Briefly share which 3 you picked. We only have 2 minutes for this because I'm slightly over time, and I want to make sure we get to the question. So just 2 minutes for this. So do it quickly. And for those on the broadcast, just stay with me and I'll kind of walk you through this myself. But pair up, share which 3 you're picking to work on and why you picked those 3. Okay, let's pair up. Julie, let's pair people up. Pick 3. And to our broadcast audience, what's so interesting is that these 13 behaviors, early on, I had people say, Stephen, you can't have 13 behaviors. No one can remember 13 things. But here was the problem. Every time I tried to condense these and, combine them and tried to get it down to, 5 or 6 or even 7, I lost too much. By combining them, the strength of these 13, they're all so specific. They're so practical. They're so tangible. And there's hard data behind this in a study of validity and reliability done by an academic consulting firm. They showed this, that the 4 cores of credibility and the 13 behaviors will predict and explain 100% of the trust on a team and 97% of the trust inside an organization. In other words, it works. And so the strength of the 13 is that they're specific, practical, actionable, as are the opposites, as are the counterfeits. And so, but if 13 is overwhelming, what I love to have people do is exactly what I'm having people do right now. I'm having them pick 3 to work on as a starting point so that you can always have a focus to your efforts. That's what we're doing here.
Stephen,
all right.
That will close in about 5 seconds.
Okay. When you say close, they're coming back?
Yeah, they're back now.
Okay, everyone is back. All right, I know we did that fast, but here's what I invite you to do. Would you take the core of credibility I asked you to work on, intent, such a high leverage core of credibility, take 3 behaviors to get better at. See that as your action plan as you walk out of our session today. Trust is learnable. Test this. Try this. We're going to learn from a great practitioner of trust, as well as a great thought leader, Doug Conant, about how he applied this and built trust, inspired trust, as building a great company at Campbell Soup Company, and really throughout his entire career, Nabisco, Avon, everywhere he's been. But trust is learnable. So I've given you 3 big ideas. First, there's a business or economic case for trust. You can put a value on it economically. Second, trust is the one thing that changes everything. It's high leveraged. It'll impact every other dimension and aspect of leadership, including energy and joy. And third, perhaps most importantly, trust is learnable. How? Through our credibility, through our behavior. There's 4 cores of credibility. There's 13 high leverage behavior. You can get your arms around this. You can get good at this. You can turn this into your greatest strength as a leader, as a team, as an organization, the ability to build trust on purpose. And with that, you'll get the multiplier effect, the dividends of high trust everywhere. So I thank you so much. And I'll just say this in conclusion. Always remember this. Well, it takes 2 or more people to have trust. It only takes 1 to start. And each of us can be that one. Professor Hastings, Professor Craig, I turn it back to you.
Well, thank you for such an extraordinary teaching with your usual immense and overriding passion. And clearly, it's obvious from this is now the 2nd time I've heard you teach this, and of course I've read your book thoroughly, that you've gleaned this by detailed observation and intense study. And when you say it, it's just blatantly obvious. It's just obvious. So just maybe a first question from me, and then Professor Craig, I know we'll have other things to pick up with you, but given it's so obvious, why is it so difficult?
It's a great question, because common sense is not common practice. The common practice in most organizations tends to be the counterfeit behavior. See, not so much the opposite, because that's self-evident, that's not going to work. Lying, it's not going to work. You're not going to build trust by lying. You might get away with it for a while, but at some point you'll run out of runway and it just won't work. But the counterfeit, spin, sugarcoating, twisting, manipulating, posturing. I've seen entire cultures where everybody is doing the counterfeit and getting away with it, and maybe even sometimes being rewarded for it. But trust goes down. And so, the real test is, how do I talk straight in a culture of spin? How do I create transparency in a culture of hidden agendas? How do I practice accountability and take responsibility in a culture of the blame game where everybody else is pointing the finger? So common sense is not common practice. Our whole goal is to make common practice of these common sense principles and to be explicit, to be intentional. But in a sense, we all know this. You're exactly right, Professor Hastings. But I love how the expression goes: to know and not to do is not to know. The challenge here is not what this is. This is self-evident. You're exactly right. It's self-evident. But it's in the doing, in the practicing, in the applying. And I believe what trips us up is counterfeit behavior. Happens all the time in most organizations. It's not evil people doing evil things inside of a company. No, it's more often good people caught up in a culture of counterfeit behavior. That's what gets in the way.
Even one of your father's great insights was that you can't talk yourself out of a problem you've behaved yourself into. When you've behaved yourself into a low trust relationship, when you've blown it, acknowledging all 13 of your behaviors to build trust, is there any place you'd start that tends to have the biggest impact if you've got a bankrupt relationship?
Yes. First of all, that's one of the great insights, isn't there? And my father said it. You can't talk yourself out of a problem you behaved yourself into. You lost trust through your behavior. The only way to get it back is through your behavior. Words alone are necessary, but insufficient. But I like to say this, though. No, you can't talk your way out, but you can behave your way out. And it's not easy, and it may not be possible in every situation. I'll acknowledge that there might be some situations where you just don't have the chance or the opportunity to behave your way back into trust, maybe because of the nature of the relationship or the willingness of both parties. Maybe they don't give you a chance, or maybe the nature of the loss of trust is so egregious, you just don't get that opportunity. But you know what? In most situations, you can behave your way back into trust. So here's what I would say. Using these 13 behaviors, here's some key ones. The first one would be to confront reality that you've lost trust. So often people in denial. You got to acknowledge, you got to see what's happening. You lost trust, confront reality. Second, I would practice accountability, meaning I own it. I take responsibility. It will always be hard to restore trust with someone else if you're saying, hey, we lost trust, but it's his fault. It's their fault. If you don't own it, that doesn't give people confidence that you're taking this seriously or taking responsibility for it. So practice accountability, own it. Third, right wrongs. Make it right when you're wrong. And that might mean making an apology. It might mean making restitution, a legal concept to make whole. Do your best to right the wrong. Fourth, I would now clarify expectations going forward of what I'm going to try to do to earn their trust back. Here's what I'm going to try to do to regain your trust. Again, I've taken responsibility. I right the wrong. And now I say, hey, I'm going to try to behave my way back into trust. So here's what I'm going to do. I tell them, I call this signaling your behavior. I tell people what I'm going to do. If I make you a commitment, I'm going to keep it, or else I won't make a commitment. If I tell you something, I'm going to tell you the truth. I'm not going to spin it or sugarcoat it. If I have an issue or a concern, I'll come to you. I won't go behind your back. I tell people what I'm going to do. I clarify expectations. And then the most important one, keep commitments. I now need to do what I just said I was going to do. I need to behave my way back into trust. But look, if you do this last point, if you always kind of deliver and do what you say you're going to do, you'll build trust. But you'll build it faster and you'll restore it faster if you first declared your intent that you want to rebuild it and why it matters to you. Second, if you signal your behavior, that is, clarify expectations of what you're going to do to try to regain it. If you do those 2 steps in front of the 3rd step, which is do what you say you're going to do, it's people are looking for it. They're aware of it. They'll recognize it. When they see it, they'll credit you more and faster. And they'll say, just like Stephen said, he said he was going to do it. He's doing it. I can start to trust this. And they'll trust you faster. But if you do those 2 steps in front of it, if you declare your intent and signal your behavior, and then don't do the 3rd step of doing what you say you're going to do, you'll lose it faster too, and you will never restore it. So I think you can restore it in more situations, but it has to be through your behavior. You got to behave your way back into trust, just like you behaved your way out of it.
Thank you, Stephen. Lord Hastings, I wonder if we have time for a question or 2 from our students.
Definitely. We need to hear from them. Yeah.
Could we go to gallery view and see who might have a question?
So students, if you have a question, just raise your hand using the button and I will add you to Spotlight.
Looks like Isaac and Christine are both raising a hand.
Isaac, go ahead.
Hey, Dr. Covey, thank you so much for your presentation, first of all. It's amazing to be able to be here and meet you. But my question is, how would you say that these principles could apply specifically to someone of our age in a student function where we're looking towards career and also, just as students?
Yeah. I come back to the idea that as a student, you're a leader. Leadership is a choice. And the essence of great leadership is trust. There's other things too, but when you're trusted, it'll make you better at everything else you're trying to do. So see yourself as a leader right now as a student. That's the first. That's a paradigm. The second is when you go to get a job, people are looking at, can I trust this person? Both their character, who they are, and their competence, what they can do. Can they deliver? Can they perform? Can they add value? Can they get along and work with people so they can collaborate? It literally becomes kind of a lens. This is a differentiator for you, that you're trusted. It becomes part of your reputation, part of your brand, to be a trusted leader, a trusted contributor, a trusted whatever your role is. To be trusted is a multiplier effect to it. Literally it precedes you, it goes in front of you. And so someone like you, we're going to just learn from Doug Conant in a few minutes, in just a couple minutes. He has such a reputation and a brand of being a trusted leader of both character and competence that it precedes him. It goes in front of him. So he goes into a new relationship and guess what? He's already known. He's never even met the person, but his reputation precedes him, that he has such trust. Warren Buffett, same thing. Such a reputation of credibility, character, competence, of being trusted. He goes into a meeting. He's already on third base in a new relationship because people trust him. Indra Nooyi, she comes in, she's credible. She already has a reputation of trust. I'm saying, right at the start of your career, if you will focus on being trusted, both because of character and competence, and see this as an extraordinary capability to build trust as a means of collaborating, innovating, engaging, inspiring people, it will be a huge advantage to you. So don't see this as a future thing. It is a present thing. And you can start right now. That's why I wanted you to start with focusing on your credibility and your behavior right now as a student. Be a trusted student, be a trusted colleague and peer, and see yourself as a leader right now as a student going forward. So I would say apply these learnings today, not wait till you're on the job. You'll be hired differently as you take this mindset.
Thank you. I appreciate that. That's so cool.
Absolutely. I think Christine had her hand up.
Yeah. So mine's kind of like taking it back to the basics where trust is about confidence. And just what advice would you have for someone who lacks confidence in themselves? Because that would make it very hard for them to extend trust towards others.
That's wonderful. That's really insightful, Christine. You're exactly right. If you don't trust yourself, you'll have a hard time building, sustaining trust with others. That's why self-trust precedes every other kind of trust. So here's my advice. Look in the mirror, start with yourself. And the key learning is this: learn to make and keep commitments to yourself. And start with the little things. It could be as simple as, I'm setting my alarm in the morning to wake up tomorrow, and I say I'm going to get up an hour early and go exercise. So when I set that alarm to exercise, when the alarm goes off, do I turn it off and hit the snooze or go back to sleep? Or do I get up to exercise? It's a small commitment, but it makes a difference. You start with the little things. Learn to make and keep commitments to yourself. William McCraven, the former commander of special operations for the military, he's retired now. He's on the Covey Leadership Center Global Advisory Board along with Doug Conant. He gave a speech at the University of Texas as a commencement speech, and he said this: if you want to change the world, make your bed. And the whole idea was start with a little small commitment that you can make and keep, and then make it and keep it at all costs, and then go from that commitment to the next, to the next, to the next. So my simple advice is learn to make and keep commitments to yourself, and your sense of clarity, of integrity, of power, of self-trust will grow from there. And from that, you can build every other kind of trust. Friends, I want to turn this back over to Lord Hastings and Boyd, Professor Craig, because we need to hear from Doug Conant. He's a practitioner as well as a thought leader of trust.
Stephen, our deepest thanks to you. What tremendous insight and value to our students and to our broader audience.